can see you better. I've gotten old since I was up here last. You know, Leilani Nicewander came up to see me a couple of weeks ago, to see Beth and I. And you know, we're all of a certain age, the three of us, and we were in and out of the house and having a good old time. And when we drove up one day into the garage, one of our little neighbor boys, he's about 4, he came over and he came up to my door and he said, "Miss Patty, why do so many grandmas live at this house?" Oh, girl, you're getting old. But I'm grateful. I am so grateful for this good life. I'm grateful to God, and I thank God as I remember you. Day by day by day, I remember you. I remember our ministry together. I look back on it, and I'm grateful for all the things that we learned and that we accomplished together. I am grateful for the church that we were together. In the spirit of Paul the Apostle, I am reminded of your sincere faith. Your sincere faith. The faith that lives so vibrantly, as Paul would say, in people like Lois and Eunice. We don't know who they were, but we know who Dale and Eleanor Bennett were. We know who Elmo Murray was, Mildred Blaylock, Glenn Nicewander, Paul Carr, over that direction, Alice Riggs, she's over there too somewhere. Sometimes she was over here. Vivian Ono, Dub and Audrey Staley, sign up, good old Dub, Elaine McGraw, Judy Morgan, Scott Lindhoff, who sat there one day and said to me, "Patty, the baptistry is overflowing." And then he ran around like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to mop it up with paper towels. As it flowed down the front, and poor Dale Bennett was there trying to give a children's moment. And the children were, and he was reading the book. Laura Swanson, Hazel Lynch. I could just go on and on and on. I buried over 100 of you while I was here. So many, many more. They're gone, but they are not forgotten. They are remembered, each one of them, for their sincere faithfulness, which lived then and still lives now in each one of you sitting in these pews. For this reason, as Paul would say, for this reason we gather together today to fan the flame of the gift of God, which is in us because the Spirit still lives and moves here, and the gospel still calls us to be the church here in Selma, and to move together in new ways and bold ways and scary ways. If you're waiting for it to not be scary, it's not going to happen. Unreasonable ways and nearly impossible ways. Now we can look back on those good old days, and we do remember times of laughter. You tried to get me to laugh all the time. All the time. I remember once I had to sidle out of the choir because this one right here was making me laugh. It made me laugh. It was times of great laughter. We can look back on those good old days, and we remember times of tears. We cried together a lot. We can look back on those good old days and remember times of challenge. This old house has not just started to fall down. It has needed constant TLC and miraculous feats of restoration for more years than any of us have lived. We spent many a meeting trying to figure out how to afford to keep it up, didn't we, Alan? We really did. You're probably still doing that. The mortar is disintegrating. The steps are too many. The roof is leaking. The AC is pumping hot air. The dome is dripping. The lights are shorting out. The organ is making a strange wheezing sound again. The paint is peeling. Curious stains are appearing in the corners that you can't get to. "Oh Lord, what shall we do?" But somewhere and somehow, we found a way to come up with the energy and the time and the faith and the money to keep on keeping on, because we loved this beautiful old place, this thin place, this sacred sanctuary, this reservoir of remembrance and faithfulness, this home away from home that echoes with the anthems of our ancestors and the laughter of our children, now grown, the prayers of the generations of those who with sincere faith dared to ask, dared to seek, dared to knock as the gospel shaped their lives. We remember challenge to be the church despite the challenge of the building, to be inclusive, welcoming, despite the steps that might have has been walls 10 feet high, despite a budget that was constantly stretched by the reality of having to pay for the building that housed us, and thus limited the dollars for ministry beyond the building. The challenge to inspire and encourage new generations to discover and share their gifts in a time and in a culture that was increasingly not interested in being the church anymore. They preferred to think of themselves as spiritual and leave the institution of the church to the old-timers who didn't mind and didn't have anything better to do than to sit and watch the dying embers of the church fade away. We remember those challenges. And we thank the grace of God that we can look back on those old days and also remember times of deep faithfulness. We dreamed a dream of having a new building that could be an inspiring and functional tool for ministry to which we were called. And so somehow, how did we do that? Somehow, we raised the money and we bought a parcel of land from Paul Carr. We set our sights on either a building on that land or letting it become somehow an investment in ministry. Serving. That's why it's there. Reaching out. We dared to change things and stretch our minds about how to do ministry in this building in the meantime. And not everybody was happy when we moved the nursery from the depths of the building out there to the front so our little ones would be more safe. But we did it anyway. We moved the choir out of their entrenched and comfortable spot downstairs so we could have a place for our littlest learners out that direction. And we let the youth paint their room black and put in bleachers for some crazy notion they had of creating a refuge from the chaos of their lives. We turned a cleaning closet into a food bank. We turned those old, out-of-date Sunday school cubby holes into a resource room for education. We created Berry Lounge so that there was a quiet and lovely space for contemplation, counseling, and small meetings. We took the stage out of the library so we could expand its use as a meeting place and fellowship center. We stretched and we dared and we wrangled with naysayers, but we dared to meet the challenges of this building, our time, and a rapidly changing culture. We discovered that during the summer there were huge numbers of children who lost ground academically because they were no longer getting fed at school. Do you remember that? So we partnered with the California Council of Churches and wrote a grant, and with the Selma Public School System, we fed those children that summer and their siblings in the fellowship hall, hundreds of them. We took on big projects like planning, resourcing, and facilitating at least 5 different annual meetings of the Christian Church in Northern California and Nevada. We sent bunches of kids to camp. Kathleen staffed those camps with loving counselors and directors. We stretched our dollars, our minds, and our hearts to expand our support of the Disciple mission fund because we believed that somehow we were extending the gospel of Christ around the world. We more than tithed our general fund budget to mission work. That was then. What about now? Paul beseeches the church to fan the flame of God, which is in you. To not be ashamed of the testimony of our Lord. To join him in suffering for the gospel. To keep the gospel as a pattern of sound teaching, and to guard the good investment, to guard the good treasure that was entrusted to us. In other words, folks, the game's not over. The game is not over. The good treasure that was entrusted to us is still here with us, and it's more than time to level up, as gamers will challenge. Now, I'm not much of a gamer. I'm old. But I do have one very frustrating game that my brother insisted I download on my phone called Gora Goa. Anybody play that? Don't. It's awful. It's addictive and you can't stop playing it. And the whole idea is that there's this little player and you guide a boy as he encounters this strange monster among a landscape that becomes war-ravaged, and then it's rebuilt. And the boy grows older and older, and he supposedly, I don't know, but he supposedly ends up an old man reflecting on his past. It's incredibly hard, and the fact is I am stuck at about level 2. He has not aged a day. In other words, I am failing to level up. And truth be told, I am not patient enough and I am not committed enough to even want to level up. As far as I'm concerned, I am happy to not play the darn game as well as not master. So is that where we are? Is that where we are as the church? Impatient and frustrated and not committed enough to even want to play the game, let alone master it? Is there any such thing as mastering this game of being Christian? I really have a suspicion that if the church survives us, it will be because the faithful realize the challenge of being the church calls us to never ends. We will always, always be called to higher levels of loving and serving and reaching out and learning and sharing and giving. To stay on the same level, as comfortable as it is to die. To choose to stay on the same level is to fail to follow Christ, whose idea of leveling up included resurrection from the dead. Let's talk about unreasonable. Let's talk about impossible. Leveling up, resurrection from the dead, endlessly leveling up. Jesus used other images. He didn't play video games. He talked about going the next mile. He talked about bringing down the roof. He talked about casting your nets into the deep. They're all images of challenge, transformation, pushing beyond our comfort zones. The bottom line, whatever image you choose, is figuring out what comes next. Where do we go from here? And it's a darn good question. There's no adequate template for being the church in these days. What used to work likely won't work anymore. But the game is not over. Beth, you haven't met her, is my new partner in life. She is a retired professor of human development, among other things. She reminded me that in developmental theory, a child is unable to see the next level of their development until their brain is ready for them to move to that stage. When it comes time to cross the threshold, they'll have what they need mentally, physically, emotionally, to move past newness, past discomfort, to that next level of faith. Oh, living. Sounds like faith to me. Sounds like faith to me. Life itself is preparing them in every moment and every experience for what comes next. So they move from being like a lump on the blanket to rolling over, to sitting up, to crawling, to pulling up on the furniture, to balancing without holding on, to terrorizing the cat, literally from baby step to baby step. God has entrusted them with a treasure trove of gifts that will be unwrapped and celebrated step by step until they're old and gray, leveling up as they go. I think the church is in a bit of a quandary in our developmental journey. Like that growing child, we can't see the next level until we're ready to cross its threshold and move onward and upward, past newness, past discomfort. But again, like that child, we can't just sit on the rug with our thumb in our mouth, reliving and retelling the stories of our past. We've got to open up our eyes to all that God has entrusted and invested in us, and then dedicate it all of it, to becoming the blessing that God has created us to be for such a time as this. Do you know that it took 100 million years for the human population of planet Earth to reach 1 billion? 100 million years to reach a population of 1 billion. We reached that number in 1830. 100 years later, in 1930, the population was 2 billion. 30 years later, it was 3 billion. 15 years later, it was 4 billion. 12 years later, it was 5 billion. 11 years later, it was 6 billion. And today, we are well on our way to 8 billion people wanting access to clean air, clean water, quality of life. Imagine that. More than half of all of the people who have ever lived on this planet are alive today. Now we add to that fact that our planet is 50% less burdened than it was when we baby boomers were chasing fireflies in the summer. 50% less species, less animals blessing this world with life since we were born. Doesn't that rattle your cage a little bit about this time in which we live? What is God calling you as a church to in the face of that vast expanse of humanity and its need? What are you being called to? God has made an investment in us and is calling us in these uncommon times, I believe, to be hope in the midst of despair, to be light in the midst of darkness, to be those people who are courageous enough to expect themselves individually and as a community to level up in such a time as this. I wish I could offer you a guideline for leveling up. I wish I could say, okay, folks, A. I can't. I'm not any more sure of how you do that than how to level up with Gorgo. I have a suspicion it's going to include the willingness to exhale the past and inhale the future. It's not that there isn't anything to learn from the past, but Scripture appeals to our hearts as God sings out, "Behold, I'm doing a new thing." What is the last really new thing that the church dared to do? We're not babes in the faith who don't have what we need to move upward and onward. We just have to invest what we have. God has already invested everything in us that we might take the next big step. Do you still have that piece of property sitting on the other side of town? So what's your dream? What's your dream? What new thing can you do? What new thing can God do over there in such a time as this? Exhale the past. Exhale the past. Inhale the future. Look with eyes of faith. See the way ahead. I don't know, let me test you out on this. I didn't talk to Maria. She hasn't given me anything that she wishes I'd tell you. This is coming just from me and maybe God, maybe. Maybe the disciples in this town, and the Lutherans and the Methodists, should all sell their buildings and pool their resources and build a multi-church faith center out there. A place of diverse worship, innovative education programs, and outrageous service to this community. Just a crazy thought. Just a crazy thought. But maybe it's crazy thoughts that we need to be dreaming these days. Maybe it is. I don't know. You're going to have to answer that question for yourself. I'm trying to answer it for myself. What crazy thought is looming out there ahead if we only would fan the flame that is flickering within us? Now is the time for crazy thoughts and bold dreams, and this gorgeous place becomes our coffin. Exhale the past. Inhale the future. Dare to dream. There's no consequence to this world if I choose not to play Gorgo. Thank goodness. But if we quietly watch the church die because we fail to fan the flame of faith, and we choose safety instead of truth, comfort instead of courage, and run away from risking our investments and investing ourselves for the sake of the gospel, then this world is in deeper trouble than we already feel it is. God is calling us to stretch, to look up, and reach out to new levels of sacrifice, compassion, commitment, service, and love. Exhale the past. Inhale the future. Dare to dream, dare to risk, dare to believe that God is doing a new thing here. A prayer of challenge for this work that is before us was written by Sir Francis Drake, just a couple years ago, centuries ago, as he set out on uncharted waters. Here is his prayer. Disturb us, Lord, when we are too well pleased with ourselves, when our dreams have come true because we dream too little, when we arrive safely because we sail too close to shore. And that, my dear, dear old friends, is once again the gospel for today. Amen. I believe the time for rising up